So we're going to go over the Michigan-Washington game in particular in a minute here. And maybe this is me being a little biased. Maybe this is me being, I'm going to be frank and honest with you guys. And up front, I think that's what you guys deserve as the audience here, as a new audience for me, by the way. If you're watching me for the first time, this is me trying to get familiar with the Voice of College Football audience here. The one thing that I really hold myself to is being honest with my audience. I'm a Michigan fan. So maybe this is a little bit of me being biased because Michigan fan wanting to talk about his team, but I also feel like this team may not be a team, frankly, that we talk about much for the rest of the season. Because Michigan is not a good football team this year. I was willing to hold back some of my takes on this team. I was willing to hold back judgment for Sherrone Moore and especially Wink Martindale and Kirk Campbell, as they're all new to their jobs. Wink Martindale hasn't coached in college for 20, 30 some odd years. Sherrone Moore's never been a head coach before. Kirk Campbell hasn't been an offensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator at anywhere outside of Old Dominion. So he's never been an offensive coordinator at this level. And knowing what they have lost from last season, coming into this season, I bought into the hype. I did. If you watch my channel, I predicted this team would go 10-2, with the caveat that I thought that they could easily also be a 9-3 team. So 9-3, 10-2 is kind of where I predicted this team going. I thought it would be a step down from where they were, because where they were was at the absolute pinnacle height of college football. This team was something like 40-3 over that 3-year run where they beat Ohio State 3 years in a row. They went to the playoff 3 years in a row, and they won the national championship. So I did think they were going to take a step down. I did think there was going to be some drop off, but I think looking back on it now, it was purely, and again, this is the honesty thing. And I tell you guys how I honestly feel, and sometimes with my self-assessments even, if you will. I think I was looking at this team through maize-colored glasses, and I think a lot of people were, to be frank, within the Michigan sphere. Sometimes we forget in college football, by the way, and we don't like to admit it because fans are fans, right? And they're obsessed with their teams like they rightfully should be. They love their teams. Their teams are near and dear to their hearts. Teams are like family to us, right? To some of us, especially, I would assume, to a lot of the people watching out here. Your team is a big part of your life. It's why you're watching a channel like this. And we won't admit that sometimes, in order to get the most honest assessment of your team, you need to turn to your rivals, or people, maybe not necessarily just the rivals, but people outside of the situation, because rivals have their biases too, right? Before the season, there was a lot of talk about how this team doesn't have a quarterback. There was a lot of talk about, weaknesses along the offensive line, replacing all 5 offensive line starters, replacing guys like Mike Sanderstill and Chris Jenkins and, others, both the linebackers on that defense, that all-time great defense from last season, by the way. And a lot of us Michigan fans and Michigan people put up what we call in like the psychology world, and that's where I have my degree, by the way. So we're going to kind of look at it through this frame for a minute, if you will. A lot of us kind of put up what we call defense mechanisms, and we kind of coped with it, and we said we denied it. We denied what was really, looking back on it now, and again, hindsight being 2020, what was really the reality of this team, which is it's got a first-time head coach, a team that lost a ton of players to the NFL, a team that just lost one of the best coaches in college football from the last 10 years. I think that's safe to say now. I know Harbaugh had his druthers at the beginning of his tenure, but it ended with a national championship. And he's one of the few, I think one of the only 3. Has there been 2 or 3 coaches that have coached in a college football national title and in a Super Bowl? Pete Carroll is the only other one I can think of, but correct me in the comments if there's others I'm blanking on. I'm only 34, just for reference. So if you got something from like the 70s, you're probably right, because I wasn't alive back then. But Michigan, I'm going to use a weird analogy here for a second. and I know it's a weird one, but bear with me. And I use a lot of weird analogies in case you haven't noticed. I'm a nerd. My camera's sitting on top of a couple of Magic the Gathering deck boxes, by the way. We run on a shoestring budget over here, and we're also massive nerds. So shout out to anyone out there who plays the greatest game on earth. I'm going to use a weird analogy, but follow along with me for a second. I think a lot of you, especially people my age, probably remember the show King of the Hill. In one of the first few episodes, it's funny. He's got his truck that he's had for like 20 years, and it's been a reliable truck, and he absolutely loves it. You know, it really pulls on my heartstrings as like a Midwestern guy who drives an F-150, you know, and grew up with like a grandpa that had an old F-150 and things like that. And he's upset and he's sad and he's grieving because his truck is obviously on the fritz and it's about to go. There's something major wrong with the engine or something. And he goes through the whole episode and he literally cries over his truck, which is like the comedic part of it, right? Who would cry over a truck? Michigan football is that truck, or it was in the off season. And the fans were Hank. We wanted so bad to hang on to what we had with Jim Harbaugh and what we had with those coordinators and what we had with Ben Herbert, that culture, that really great head coach, that winning program, all those players. But we forgot in a way that that's not how time works. That's not how college football works. We opened this whole thing up talking about NIL and player movement and how it's at an all-time high. Barry Switzer, maybe Barry Switzer. I don't know, Jim R, maybe. Thank you for the comment, by the way. Get your super chats in, by the way. And we will read them. We will read the super chats for sure. That's me reminding myself to read the comments because otherwise I will forget. But Michigan wanted so bad to hang on to something that wasn't tenable. Things don't last forever. Coaches move on. Coaches go on to other things. And I don't frankly care why Jim Harbaugh moved on. You can say it was over the Connor Stallion stuff, and we're not really going to get into the Connor Stallion stuff here. That's old news at this point. We're not going to do that. It was a matter of time before Jim either went back to the NFL or retired. It was a matter of time before Ben Herbert looked for greener pastures and went somewhere else. It was a matter of time, especially in this modern era of college football with player movement. Of course, the NFL draft has always been a thing. When you have really great players like JJ McCarthy, they tend to leave after their junior season. What I'm saying is things change, things evolve. And if instead of maybe looking back on it, instead of hanging on for dear life and clutching onto that continuity word, which was the key word for Michigan this offseason, maybe, just maybe, we should have been ready to accept the fact that it was just the end of an era for Michigan football and things were going to change. And the funny thing is, now we're sitting here at 4-2. The team is not playing great. By the way, we have some stats here. This team is 56th in the country in scoring 22.33 points per game is all they're scoring right now. They have the 114th ranked pass defense. Let that sink in. 114th pass defense. That's not the offense. That's how bad this team is at stopping other teams passing the football. And I know some people are going to say, you played Texas, you played USC, you played a good Washington passing team. What did Michigan do the past 3 seasons when they played teams like that with Jesse Minter as a defensive coordinator? Absolutely shut them down. 90th and third down defense, 40% in that category. By the way, this team is giving up 10.39 yards per completion to opposing offenses, over 10 yards per completion to guys like Will Rogers and Quinn Ewers and Miller Moss. And they're 61st, a team that historically has been great in red zone defense, even going back to the Don Brown era. Speaking of Don Brown, Wink Martindale, I don't care what you have to say about the Don Brown comparisons. Don Brown at this point is a better fucking defensive coordinator than you. So you should start maybe appreciating the fact that you're getting compared to Don Brown. Sorry for the language. Definitely not drinking on the job. Don't tell on me, guys. Thanks again, Mark, for this great opportunity. Hope I'm not screwing it up too much. 61st in red zone defense. 61st. 82% of the time they give up a score. So maybe with hindsight being 2020, we look back and maybe, and I know this may sound crazy because we're 6 games into his tenure, but was Sharon Moore the right hire? Now that's only going to like bear out in the long run, and I do think that he is a man who may be capable of building a program. But these are year zero statistics for a coach. This is year zero stuff. This is not continuity. This is rebuild. And that's how we need to start framing this. This isn't continuity. This isn't the same old culture. This culture is not the same when you're playing like this. Because the culture that Michigan had before was not giving up 10.39 yards per completion to the opposing offense. By the way, three of the top passing defenses in college football, Minnesota, Texas, and now I'm trying to think of the other one. 3 of them. I just looked it up earlier today. 3 of the top 4 passing defenses are teams that you've played because they get the benefit of playing basically Navy because you don't have a quarterback and you can't throw the ball. And I'm sure within the building there were signs of that. But we heard all off season continuity. This is the same culture. These are the same people. You can't hang on to something forever. You know, there's been things in my life, there have been jobs, there have been people, there have been roles that I've been in, there have been places that I lived that I wanted to hang on to, that I wanted to stay in, but times change and you got to move on. And are Michigan fans ready for that? I don't know.